What's up, gangsters? How about part 2.5 of the build review series on the little Arma Hobby 1/72 scale Mustang. Now, this is a little weird because usually when I do these build review things, it's two parts, with the first part kind of going over my early impressions of the kit and the second part being the finished project. But I ran into some things with this as I was working on it and felt like there was some stuff that was worth saying that might be valuable to anybody who's building this thing. And I filmed a clip that I was going to include in the normal part 2, but as usual it ended up being long, and I'm like, okay, it's 30 minutes, I can just make it a standalone episode. So here it is. All right, so here we go. This is where the thing is right now. This is now middle of November 2022. And as you can see, I've got the wings and the fuselage joined together, and I've done some painting. I guess this is also kind of good because it gives you a chance to see an intermediate stage. And what I'm trying to do here with this different gray and green shading going on. It's not really shading. What I'm doing is setting myself up for chipping down the road. The deal with Mustang wings, in case you're not familiar, is that the front 40% of the wing was filled and smoothed and sanded so that it maintained laminar flow across the surface of the wing. That was a major, it was one of sort of the defining features of the Mustang. And this started on the very earliest versions of the Mustang. So even on the B and C models, you're going to see that. And there's a really good book, if you ever want to know exactly how they did it, called Building the Mustang. It's by a guy named O'Leary, written in 2015. And he does a great job. He's got some really good photos in there and some descriptions from the North American manufacturing facility. But just to give you a little bit of an explanation, what they did is they did a lot of wind tunnel testing, and that's how they figured out that the first 40%, which is basically back to the front edge of the gun bay, is all that really mattered. That if they went further than that, it was just kind of a point of diminishing returns, and the labor cost and the time necessary to do that body work just didn't really pay off. So what they did is the first thing is they sprayed the whole wing with zinc chromate yellow primer. And in the area right here by the wing walk, they sprayed 2 or 3 layers of it. And they sometimes they did some filling there, some light sanding, not a lot in the back part. You'll see different things in different pictures, but for the most part, that's all they did for that part of the wing surface. Then on the front part of the wing surface, they used some red Acme filler, basically like Bondo, and came along and filled and sanded all of the rivets and joints on the front part of the wing. Then they came over that with a layer of Acme gray surfacer primer. Again, just a high build surface primer. And the whole thing gets sanded, and then the entire wing, of course, gets painted with DuPont silver aluminum doped lacquer. So that's the deal, and that's what I'm trying to accomplish. And I'm purposefully leaving any little bits of texture and even some flurm so that when I come back with the olive drab on top of all this, the first step I'm going to do is a little bit of sanding to reveal little chips and flecks where you see the gray and the zinc chromate underneath. Anyway, let's back up a bit though. Okay, so clearly we are going back in time here because it is not all put together. I am at what I hope is the point where I am about to attach the wings to the fuselage. As you can see, I've done a lot of work, filled and smoothed all the panel lines. Did some pre-painting to get ready to do some layers of the zinc chromate and the gray, and so that's what's going on there. I've also been doing some work on the gun ports here, they were a bit unsatisfactory, and here in a minute I'm going to open a brand new, still in the wrapper boxing of this kit, so that I can explain some of the stuff I'm about to talk about, and so I can do a sanity check, and I'll show you probably why these needed a bit of work. The other thing is that I forgot about this little, I guess it's an access hatch right here on the nose behind the port exhaust stacks, and it's indicated in the instructions. I just straight up forgot about it. And they actually do a really good job of telling you what to do. They give you a little tiny piece of photo etch that you're supposed to use as a scribing guide, and you can see right here in step 24 where they tell you, see the little pink piece of photo etch and the pink arrow, and they tell you, give you a really good sketch of where it's supposed to be, and tell you that if you're doing either option 1 or 4 that you need that. And apparently that's a little access hatch that was on early B or C model Mustangs, because I'm doing option 1, which I think definitely is an early one. And when I look at reference photos of Ding Hao, you can see that little detail is in fact there. So yeah, got to do that. I will say though, and I'll show you this in a minute when I get into the box. Well, I'll just save that for after I open it. Anyway, let's get into the package and see what the unopened kit looks like, and talk about a couple of the other challenges that I've had. Okay, so now that I got that all out of the package, I've gone ahead and taped together the fuselage and added the horizontal stabilizers, so I can talk through this a little quicker. The first area of concern is with the tail. And I think the engineering here is really brilliant. I wish every model kit company would do this. They've got the horizontal stabilizers as a single piece that just fits into a nice notch here. And you can see that the fit is really good. The panel line serves as the joint there on top. You can see where it curves around there. And, honestly, they pulled this off better than I ever expect anybody but Tamiya to. I honestly just wish most of these kit companies wouldn't even try to make the panel line be the joint, because it almost never turns out good. But they pulled it off. The other part of the joint that you can see there under the tape is also a pretty good fit. So that's a relief. I think when I put mine together, I did not have even to use any additional filler there other than the autofill that you get when you put extra thin in the joint and squeeze it together, and a little bit of softened styrene spooges out, and then you just sand that down and you're done. So you can see mine came out really good right there. But where mine did not come out good, in spite of how it looks right here, is in that joint that you see, that where that panel line is that runs horizontally right above the tail plane. So what happened? All right, this is what you're looking at when you're at that stage of the assembly. And what happens is that you take the vertical stabilizer, and again, really clever engineering. You got these two little pins right there that go into those two holes, and you just basically just pop it on there. Maybe I can never do this stuff on camera. Anyway, just pop it on there, and hopefully it stays. Anyway, so this is what I was looking at after I glued the horizontal or the vertical stabilizer on. You can see that there's quite a gap there. You can see daylight through there. It's definitely not going to be the panel line that it's supposed to be. Now, the reason that happened is because, all right, as you can see, this is supposed to be a continuous surface across the top of this part of the subassembly. All the way along here is supposed to be a continuous surface. And it should be, okay? And whoops, well, there goes all my careful prep work of putting that thing on and taping it down. That's annoying. That's what happens when you have lobster hands. But anyway, so let me get this back on here. Okay, hopefully that'll stay put enough to get through this explanation. All right, if you, several guys have noticed a little bit of trouble here, and the problem is that this piece seems to want to pop up here at the back. It's exaggerated right now, but it seems to want to pop up there at the back when you really press down on the front of it. And you can see that underneath because obviously the portion right there by the elevator hinge is not all the way down. And when you press it all the way down, it seems like it's got a little bit of a tendency to pop up there in the front. So I think what happened with me is I was really focused on mashing it down right there and making sure that was tight. And I neglected to notice the little step that leaves right there. You see it. And walked away to let the glue set up and let everything get hardened. And when I came back then and put the vertical stabilizer on, I had that bit of daylight right there that you saw. And you can see the proof of it when you look at the bottom of mine, and you can see that right there that portion of the horizontal stabilizers is not as far down as it should be. So not a fault of the kit. That is 100% a self-inflicted gunshot wound on my part that required a lot of basic modeling skills, a lot of filling, sanding, and re-scribing to get that gap to look like a nice panel line right there. And it's fine now, but yeah, it was pain. So just don't be a ham-fisted moron like I was and make the same mistake, and you should be fine right there. Again, here's what mine looked like. Okay, that's what it looked like right there when I started, and yeah, I was appalled. But again, totally my fault. If you do everything correctly, you should be able to get that squeezed down to where it's a, it's a much more manageable issue. But again, you can see it's trying to pop up there at the front, and I don't really know why that is, but you just have to manage both parts of that joint. Maybe what you do is when you assemble the horizontal stabilizer, you put some glue only in the front part and mash it down and hold it really good, or maybe even use some super glue to tack it. And then once that's firm and you know it's not going to move, then you come around to the back and you just force that down and glue it. Because when I'm holding both sides, you can see that it works pretty good, works just fine. Or, don't be quite as adamant that you not need to add any filler at the front part, whatever. You just have to manage that. Situational awareness. Anyway, all right, the next issue that I ran into was here at the front of this clear part that includes the windscreen, where it mates up against the nose. I had a significant step, and it was bad. I mean, it was like a millimeter. It was really bad. And so that's the main reason why I bought this additional kit, because while pretty much everybody that I've talked to about it has seen some degree of the same issue, mine was definitely the worst. And so I wanted to have a look for myself, and at a brand new kit that did not have the instrument panel combing underneath this clear part, and see if this again was just a self-inflicted gunshot wound, or if there was in fact an issue, given that it didn't seem like anything had gone wrong, and that other guys were seeing it as well. I even asked a couple of guys to do this exact state of dry assembly and see what they noticed. And you can see that this is pretty well all the way down. I'm going to take this back off here because it's going to fall off anyway. With it in this exact state of dry assembly, there's a bit of, you can see a bit of the step right there. This is about half what I had or less, but this much seems to be pretty common. And you can see that it's not because it's not pressed all the way down to the fuselage. It's also a little challenging. It kind of depends on how you're looking at it as to how much of that step is visible, kind of what the angle is, and if you're against a light colored background or a dark colored background. But you can see there, it looks pretty good from that angle. And it looks like if you close up that last little bit of the gap, that it'll be flush. But as you start to rotate it around, you can see that there's a little bit of a step. It seems like it shows up more on the starboard side. And if you flip it over, you can see that it's not because it isn't fully seated on that side either. So that's probably that's maybe one of the best views of it. I just cannot get it close enough to the camera. There we go. You can see there it is. And again, it kind of depends on how much how you rotate it as to how much you can see it. But there it is. Okay, so the question is it about something that's happening here, or is it maybe about the instrument panel combing that goes underneath it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this back off of here. I'm going to get the instrument panel combing off of the sprue, and I'm going to super glue it in here so that it's temporary, and we'll take another look at it that way. But before I do that, there's a couple of things I want to point out that I noticed that made a difference, a little bit of difference. Not enough to solve the problem for me, but a little bit of difference. Okay, first is if you look right here at each side of the opening there, you can see there's a little bit of a parting line witness, but it's not much. I mean, there's not even any flash or anything there. So, you know, that doesn't even stick up 0.005 of an inch, you know, 0.1 millimeters. So that should not really be much of a factor, but it is there, and I am going to scrape that off. The other thing is, if you look under magnification, you will see that those inside corners right there at the front and back of that opening are a little soft. They're a little bit rounded. I mean, it's you know, you really have to be looking at it under magnification. I don't know that you'll be able to see it here on camera, but the outside corners on this piece are really perfectly sharp. Again, probably not going to be able to see it here, but that creates a very slight amount of interference. So if that is, you know, if you see that that's the case, the simple thing to do is to just take this is an 800 grit sanding sponge, and I mean just barely take and soften those corners just a little bit. Doesn't take much at all. Just soften those a little bit, and really it's mostly this front one that's the culprit. But if you do that and take off that mold flash, then there really is nothing between this clear part and the fuselage that can cause an issue. Okay, so real quickly, I went ahead and took that witness off so you can see, maybe if it'll focus right there, you can see that's gone. That's a hard thing for the camera. It's all gray plastic and just difficult, but I think you can see there that witness is gone. All right, I also knocked the corners off of this little clear part, and I put a little bit of red Sharpie on that front edge to make it really easy to see. So just real quickly, before we do anything else, let's see how things look with those sort of two obvious issues taken care of. Okay, you can immediately see that it now pretty naturally nestles down into its landing zone, and that does a lot to alleviate the step on both sides. Still sitting up just a little bit, but when you press it down in there, looks pretty good, and there's it's proud just a little bit, not a lot, and it's not really the same all the way around, but you can see it's only proud just a little bit. Nothing that you can't knock off with a little bit of light sanding. So that would be pretty good. But when I did mine, taking care of that witness and those corners really did not do much to solve the problem because the total size of the step was like 10 times that. But what was different is that I had the instrument panel and the instrument panel combing in place. And so that's the next thing to check is what effect, if any, that has on things. So I am going to get it off of the sprue. It's right here. And like I said, I'm going to super glue it on there so it's temporary. And we'll see if that changes things. Okay, so the engineering on this instrument panel combing is really nice. When you add the instrument panel itself to the bottom side of this, it fits wonderfully and it just hangs under there. So there's nothing that it can interfere with. And then you can see in here where I've got that little drop of the black Starbond super glue that I love so much, that it's just a little notch. And there's two little tabs there that fit directly into that. And maybe if I'm lucky, it'll just drop into place and it'll be all good. And it did. And now I will put a little bit of kicker on there. One thing that I learned with putting this thing together so far, for whatever reason, this polystyrene is very susceptible to damage from kicker. This is just, I think, like the Zap-A-Gap kicker, and I don't know that there are different formulations or what, but this stuff, I have noticed that with some styrene, like if you get some under your thumb or something, you can leave a little bit of a blemish. Really bad with this kit. This styrene seems to be a little softer than some other stuff like Tamiya. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it's definitely something to be aware of. And I also learned the hard way, do not get kicker on the clear parts because it will screw them up and you'll be polishing. Anyway, now let's take a look, okay? The combing is in there. Really, drops in beautifully, fits wonderfully. No reason to be suspicious of that. And when you look at the underside, you can see that it goes in those notches just like it should. Really good engineering. I like it. Now, let's see what happens when we put this back on there. Okay, pops right in. Oh, yep, looks pretty good on each side. Fits about the same. So that answers the question of whether or not there is naturally any interference between the combing and the underside of that clear part, and there shouldn't be. I mean, these guys are not idiots. They know what they're doing, so you wouldn't expect there to be, but, sometimes things happen. But it does not explain what happened with mine, because at this stage, again, my clear part was sticking up like a millimeter. It was really, really bad. And I spent a lot of time working on every possible thing that I could think of that might be creating an interference to solve the problem. Like I even went as far as to completely remove those little triangular protrusions there because I don't think that they were hitting, but they could have been. I mean, my combing was sitting just like that on the starboard side and was maybe just, I don't know, maybe 0.1 millimeters, maybe 0.2 millimeters high on the port side. But I filed all that down. I made sure I used, basically I used Sharpie ink as a diagnostic tool to see if it transferred when I pressed this piece on and there was an interference, and there just wasn't. And so I'm still mystified as to why the step on mine was so bad. I mean, you can see there's a little bit of a step there. Again, mine was 3-4 times as bad. And I had to, in the end, I had to remove material from these two edges to get the thing to settle far enough down. And that also meant taking some material out from underneath there. I did a lot of work, and ultimately I got it. And you might still be saying, well, this is obviously a self-inflicted gunshot wound. You did something wrong. But here's the thing. If you look, okay, I got the front of mine to be flush. Okay, I don't know how much more flush it could be. It might even be a little low on this side. But at any rate, it's flush. And I did it without touching the outside surface of the part because I did not want to mess up that rivet detail right there. So, with all the work that it took me to make that happen, here's the thing. Notice the difference in height at the joint between the windscreen and the canopy. See that? The canopy's tall right there. If the windscreen was still sitting up as high as it was, that wouldn't be there. That is about the amount of material that I took off the bottom of this clear part. So it really is a mystery. I honestly have no explanation. I'm dumbfounded, completely baffled. I'm not saying that it's not my fault, that I didn't do something wrong. I just don't know what it could have been. It's just a mystery. All's well that ends well, because I think it looks fine now. And since I'm doing the bubble top and it's open, that's not going to matter. But when I put the closed canopy version of the bubble top in there, because they give you both, they give you a separate clear part for open and closed bubble top, Malcolm hood. When I put the closed version on there, it's the same as this. The edge of it sticks up too tall. So yeah, again, I don't really know. I'm probably always going to be mystified by this, but it's something that I would encourage you to examine closely when you build this kit. Okay, I almost forgot to show you a couple of things. I talked about this little hatch thing here on the side of the nose, and this is the photo etch guide for that. It's this photo etch part number 7. And, it's cool that they give you that, but honestly, I think it's always better to scribe inside than it is outside, because you don't have the possibility of overrun if you're working on the inside of a guide. So what I ended up doing was I used the photo etch part. I just super glued it onto the proper spot here, and then I used some high-Q scribing guide tape. I drew around the part with the photo etch part with a pencil first, and then took it off, and then put high-Q photo etch guide then I put high-Q scribing tape on there to create an inside pattern, and did the scribing. And it's not too bad. I mean, it's tough to get the lines to match. I mean, it's a little bitty thing, and one of those deals where I'd feel a lot better about it on either 1/48th or 1/32nd, but it's not bad. But whether or not I prefer an innie or an outie for that type of thing is kind of irrelevant, because my understanding is they're no longer going to include the photo etch in the expert set, which begs the question, If you're building Ding Hao or the other one that requires that, what are you going to use to make to make your scribing guide? You may have to just draw it on there by hand or whatever, and I don't know. That's a question. But here's what was going on with the gun ports, and maybe you'll be able to see this. I don't know. It's going to be kind of difficult with this wing still on the sprue. But the bottom line is that these openings are a little more almond shaped than they are round when you look at them from the front. And they don't come together as a circle the way that they should. And I just couldn't live with it. So what I ended up doing was I drilled them out. I already had the guns in there because you put those in there before you put the two halves of the wing a sub-assembly together. So I just drilled them out, guns and all, and reshaped them a little bit and did a little body work, and that's what's going on. They're a little big, but when you look at reference photos, the openings are actually pretty big. And the shape is a lot better now, and I think that's more important because the bad shape was so obvious, and being a little oversized, not as much. So anyway, that's that. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So first, let me address something that I said as I was filming. There's been some commentary around. There always is when you talk about fit issues around dry fitting, and it's kind of like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I can't even count the number of times that I dry fit this canopy or windscreen piece and this vertical stabilizer before I committed to glue. I think maybe the way that I said it in the video sort of implied that I just glued this on there and then there was a gap that I had to deal with. Yeah, no, because that would just be stupid. Ain't nobody got time for that. Again, I can't even count the number of times that I dry fit this vertical stabilizer on here to get rid of the step that I caused myself across that mounting surface. And it wasn't until I was really confident that I had done all that I could do to eliminate that. I don't have the horizontal stabilizer on there, so you can't really see it. Anyway, I didn't commit to glue until I was confident that I had done all I could do. But it was still a joint trying to be a panel line, and that's where all of the sanding and scribing came in right there in that area. It wasn't because I had a huge gap to fill. So anyway, just want to make sure that's clear. The other thing is that you may have noticed while I was wagging this around that this is broken right here, the fuselage. And you can see that it is truly broken. It's not a short shot. And you may also, if you're sharp-eyed, notice that that is right where the gate got clipped off. And so your first thought may be, well, Pattison, you must have busted it when you were taking this off the sprue. And that was my first thought. But I never could find the fragment in the bag. And so then I was able to go back and look at the video footage. Thank goodness I chose to film the actual unbagging of this thing, because I was able to go and look and see this sprue while it was still in the bag, and that is in fact broken. So it came that way. The good news is that the guys at Arma are super cool, and they've got a good system for replacing sprues. You go on their website, you fill out a little thing, you create an account and tell them what you need, and it'll show up pretty quickly. At least that's what happened when I had a missing sprue in my in this box. So super cool. All's well that ends well. No big deal. You may also be wondering what the heck this gizmo is. I have gotten like really sort of curious with this obsession over having wingtips and everything all perfectly, even, and it's a good thing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But anyway, you can't really measure something without having a good fixture, which can be difficult with an aircraft at this stage. So I just have this little fixture that I designed in Fusion 360 and 3D printed, and you can see that I've got magnets under the tail. And they're all the same thickness, so in theory, the tail is level with the world and everything else should be, assuming that it's all put together correctly. So anyway, that's the explanation of that, and I think it'll come in handy when it's time to do decals and some weathering. Okay, so there you go. Hopefully you find that useful. I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. I think this is a great kit. I think there are some challenges, but look, especially when you consider how new to the game these guys are. I mean, I think they've produced, half a dozen kits at this point. They're doing pretty good. I mean, there are companies, we won't mention any, like Fairfix. Sorry, I had a dust in my nose there. Who have been doing it for decades and decades and can't do as good as this. So look, I think these guys are to be commended, and I think it's important for anybody who's going to build it to know where those challenges are, and maybe it even helps the guys at Arma themselves as they go down the road and onto their future projects. I mean, look, I have an engineering background, and hopefully this contributes to their own engineering efforts. Anyway, that's it. That's that for part 2.5 or whatever you want to call it. Hopefully I'll see you back here for the finished project. As always, I appreciate you watching. Much love.